This is Homebuyer Radio with home loan expert Dan Morales. Dan has been one of the nation's leading mortgage lenders since 1991, and weekly he shares with you valuable insight into the home buying process. Whether it's your first home or not, Dan will help you have a better understanding of the home buying process. Let's get started with this week's episode. Dan, what do you have for us this week?
Hey, it's Homebuyer Radio. This is episode number 81. Dan, the mortgage man Morales, here with you. Hey, this week I wanted to talk about what does your loan officer do, right? And, I know my staff likes to think I do nothing. And I kind of wish that was what I did, was nothing. I think my job would be a lot more enjoyable. But as your loan officer, what my job is it's to work with you to properly structure your transaction where it is the most ideal for you. Okay. A lot of times it may seem like I am, an interrogator, right? When I talk to clients, there's this kind of barrage of questions that are coming their way. And the reason why I ask those questions is because as I go through the process of working with you, I am trying to help you to determine what is going to be the most ideal or best way to get your loan approved, and what's going to be the most, the best way to structure it for the most favorable terms and most favorable outcome, if you will. Okay, so that is where a large part of my time is spent. It's spent in going through and just working with clients on the front end of this process and saying, okay, here's how we can best structure your loan. It's going to kind of hit your long-term goals and objectives, and it's just going to make the most sense for you financially, right? Because when it comes to mortgages, I think a lot of times people don't realize that there are so many different ways that you can get a loan approved. And there's so many different ways you can structure a loan, and some ways may be better than others. And I always tell people, the best rate on the wrong mortgage is still a bad deal. And oftentimes, I'll talk to clients and I'll come up with a solution that is very different than what somebody else might have told them. And that's because I've done this for 27 years. So when I talk to you and I'm asking you questions and I'm really getting to understand kind of what your long-term goal and objectives are, and your overall financial picture, I'm really going through and I'm kind of trying to drill a little bit deeper so that when we put together a structure for you, it's going to be what is going to make the most sense for you when it's all said and done. So my job is spent on doing that. So when we go through and we get that, approval lined up for you, or we work with you on a pre-approval and we get kind of all those details together, what happens is we know what our game plan is once you do find a house and you get your offer accepted. And then at that point, once you get your offer accepted, we nail down the final terms and final loan structure, and then the team kind of kicks in, right? And I, in the last, couple episodes of the podcast, we talked about what an underwriter does. We talked about a lending assistant and a processor. What do they do as part of all this process as well too? What happens is, and I kind of went about this the opposite way. I should have started with the loan officer and then the lending assistant and processor and then the underwriter. But if you can't tell, in the course of doing this podcast, I kind of come up with the content as we go, right? And then so I did this a little bit backwards, but in this case as a lender, my job is to help you structure the file so everything is in the most ideal structure for you. Well, oftentimes then at that point, once you get an offer accepted on a property, or once we decide to move forward with a transaction, at that point, then my lending assistant and processor will kind of, come in and get the rest of the documents and paperwork together so that we can get your loan approved. And then, they get all that stuff together. They submit it to an underwriter who's going to issue the final loan approval. And then ideally we close, right? So, that's, what I spend the most of my time with. I spend most of my time, in all honesty, is spent on the phone, talking with clients, meeting with clients in person, and in all honesty, returning email and text messages. The volume of email and text messages I get can be really significant and can take a fair amount of time to return, and answer questions that people have. Because sometimes, clients' situations are unique, right? Like they're not always easy to be able to, explain in a short email. So sometimes it ends up becoming a half-hour phone conversation to help a client understand here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it, and here's why it makes sense to do it this way versus another way. Okay, so as a loan officer, that's what I do. I know the staff likes to think I do nothing, and I truly wish that was the case, that I did nothing, but I do actually work. So that's kind of my explanation of what a loan officer does. The past week we talked about the lending assistant and processor, as well as an underwriter. So just a quick overview. We've covered some of this before in the early episodes of the podcast, but didn't maybe go into quite as much detail as far as what these people do and what their roles are, and how we all function together as a team to make sure we're taking good care of you. Hey, do me a favor. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it. Share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, share it on Instagram. Any place that you can pass it on. It helps us to grow our audience. More importantly, it helps us to hopefully have a meaningful impact on people who are looking to buy a house, so that they have the most favorable outcome possible. If you are in the market to buy a house, we would love to have the opportunity to work with you. We lend in the majority of the 50 states and offer most products within the majority of those 50 states. Again, not every product in every state, but in most states we do offer most of the products and options. And if we can't help you with a specific product in a specific state, I've got a network of friends throughout the country that we can get you connected with as well too. But do me a favor, write a review on iTunes. If you are in the market for a mortgage, reach out to us. We'd love to have you. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Homebuyer Radio is a production of Dan Morales, home lending expert with North Point Bank, NMLS number 709729. Dan can be reached at 616-931-4629 or online at danmorales.com. Thanks for listening, and we invite your questions and show ideas at homebuyerradio.com. All loans are subject to credit approval. This is not a commitment to lend. North Point Bank is an equal housing lender, all rates reserved.